bit more about transformative education framework, why we thought that's the kind of right way for us to go ahead with embedding the good practices into our education and student experience. So I'm Vrinda Nayak. I'm the Associate Dean for Taught Students, Racial Equality and Inclusion, and I'm joined by my colleague Sean. Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sean. I'm a senior education developer working on the Transformative Education Framework, and I'm also a PGR student at Sheffield.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope all will go fine with sharing, and I hope you are able to see my presentation. So Rosie or Sean, can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to give a little bit of introduction for everyone, saying why we thought this is the kind of why we visualize this as a kind of a framework that will help us to embed our strategies and priorities. I know that there are people who are from outside as well. Hopefully, having this information would be helpful to see how we are making connection with our strategies and priorities and bringing those into our education and student experience through transformative education framework. So in our University Strategy 2030, we have mentioned that our purpose as a university is to use the power of education and research to create a sustainable, healthy, and socially just future. That's quite a powerful sentence there to say that what we want to achieve, what our students to achieve, to think about kind of future facing or future positive thing about what we want to see in our society as well as communities with respect to the sustainability and human health and the social justice as well. And this is also part of our education strategy where we have a theme called Success for All. So Success for All focuses on thinking about bringing a diverse community of learners into our University of Exeter, and making sure that these learners are successful in whichever program they have chosen to make sure that they realize their potential and be able to achieve what they want to achieve through education. And also thinking about global 21st century education, which is another theme, thinking about how to make sure that our learners, our students are globally competitive. They know what it means to be a global citizen, having the skills and knowledge that is required for them to operate in a very globalized world or societies. We also have something called University of Environment and Climate Emergency Policy Statement, where we have recognized that climate emergency is something that we really want to address through education and research. And as part of our education, we would like to make sure that we embed sustainable development goals and climate emergency across all our courses. So making sure that our students develop a kind of holistic understanding of what it is and how that could be addressed as relevant to their disciplines. And also access and participation plan. Many of you know that many institutions have now recently submitted their access and participation plan. This is a requirement of the Office for Students. It's a regulatory obligation that we show that what we are setting ourselves in terms of providing support to our underrepresented students, making sure that they all have equality of opportunity to access, succeed in, and progress from higher education. This again brings us our focus onto diversifying our cohorts and enabling them to achieve their success. Internationalization agenda, no institution can undermine the impact of this at the moment. And we know that we are all geared to think about more the diversity of student, but thinking about how to internationalize it, both from student and staff community perspective. There is Teaching Excellence Framework, which has a separate strand called Education Gain, thinking more about a holistic experience for our students and helping each institution to gain that in a more kind of a under the heading educational gain, thinking about various aspects, both extracurricular, curricular activities that will help us to give that kind of better experience for all our students. There are other institutional priorities which are related to the charters, where we have said that we will be part of these charters so that we can work towards the action plans or the goals set this by charters. For example, Race Equality Charter by Advanced HE Tina Varaha is there, who is part of Advanced HE and Race Equality Charter. So we have now Bronze Award, but just because we have received a Bronze Award, it's not that our job is done. We have set ourselves a action plans called Race Equality Action Plans, making sure that we keep working on these action plans and try to achieve even better outcomes for everyone, but especially ethnic minorities, students and staff there. So mental health charter is, we have this ambition of applying for this charter. We are preparing for that. Again, looking at promotion of mental health and well-being to everyone, but again, thinking more holistically about how to bring that as part of our curriculum, assessment and teaching practices. So considering all these priorities, we really need to think about how to embed this in a more practical way, how to make sure that what we say is not just words or not just for the sake of a strategy or setting a priority for ourselves, but also how we work towards achieving it. And that's where we started working towards understanding how to bring this, all these priorities into a kind of a one framework, so that our educators feel that whatever they're trying to do is quite holistic and they don't have to do it kind of as a separate element. For example, when it comes to thinking about sustainability, instead of creating just a separate tool for that, bring that under one framework where we also address racial and social justice and help people to understand the importance of how these things are connected, because all of us know that sustainability is not just about climate emergency or anything to do with nature or biodiversity or earth, but it's also about thinking more holistically about how we can make sure our world a better place for everyone. So that means thinking about inclusive education and racial and social justice are need to go hand in hand when we are thinking about sustainability. So this kind of three pillars were identified in collaboration with students and staff. At the beginning of 2021, we really worked with many students through various kind of initiatives. The students who were interested in decolonizing the curriculum, or students who were very keen on bringing SDGs or addressing the issues related to climate emergency, staff who were interested in these issues. So we all came together and we recognized these three as pillars that are important for us as at the University of Exeter. So that's why those three pillars have been mentioned as part of the framework. But as you can see that the three pillars are interconnected. The arrows between the squares indicate that they can't be really, anything that we do can't be separated out into put into a one box, say that it just stays here. For example, if you're thinking about decolonizing the curriculum or diversifying the curriculum, you know that you are addressing that as part of racial and social justice, but it can also feed into our SDGs and SDG mapping. But how we are thinking about degree awarding gaps and how we are addressing it is also part of inclusive education. That's why those arrows really say that these are all interconnected principles. You really can't separate out certain activities into one box and put them in box. And that is quite important for us to think this as a working together on all these principles. And this is like a, sorry, I think someone's mic is on. If it would be helpful if you mute it, please. Yeah. So this is like a vision as well as a roadmap for what we would like to achieve in our education. And we thought that it's quite important for disciplines to embed this as they feel appropriate, as it is suitable for their discipline areas, but also thinking about how to bring this as part of module content, teaching and learning practices, and assessment and feedback processes. Because these three are the main components of education and student experience. So if we bring this as part of all three, it will be a good way of making sure it's embedded equally in all parts of student and education experience, but also making sure that the autonomy or the ways of a discipline thinking about how to bring it. So some people may, so for example, think about decolonizing the curriculum as the right way of embedding it, and then thinking about diversifying or liberating or internationalizing or globalizing curriculum can also be part of that. And how it can be done as a appropriate way can be discussed with their students and staff, because a collaborative way is the best way to go ahead. So we have some institutional support to make this happen. For example, Sean is the part of our educator development team. They are quite happy to come to departments and give workshops programs, and that's what they do. We have some funding ports like Exeter Education Incubator and some global classroom funding, which help to bring these principles into action. They always support co-creation with students. So we have sometimes we have used this funding to support our student interns to work with us. For example, I myself had a grant from Exeter Education Incubator where we recruited 10 students from BMBS cohort, year 3 and year 4, to do the curriculum review of year 1 and year 2 so that they can tell us what is missing, what can be done better. So that has really made our kind of a way of embedding this into more kind of a democratic. We are listening to what they're telling us. We are also bringing our subject expertise to make that happen. So that's what we envisage, or what we would like educators to bring that. So I'm stopping here now because I would like to make this a bit more interactive, and Sean is also helping me with that. So Sean has created a Padlet link, which he's quite happy to add it to the chat, I believe. And what we would like to ask you is, now you know that what is transformative education framework with its 3 principles there: inclusive education, racial and social justice, and sustainability. How do you see that as a way of embedding those into your teaching and learning practices, whether it's curriculum, assessment practices, or module content? What do you think are the kind of enablers, or what do you think are the barriers for doing that? So bringing them together, how someone can make sure that is embedded into their course design, teaching and learning practices, and assessment and feedback processes, or what stops them from doing that? So this is just a activity. You can use the Padlet, but if anyone is interested in raising their hand and have it raise their hand and share it with the group, that's also fine for me. Thank you. Sean, do you want to share the Padlet screen?
Yeah, I've shared it in the chat, but do you want me to put it on the screen?
Yes, please. If then that would be helpful for us to see what messages are coming in. Yeah, lack of time to take the step back and develop rather than just getting it done due to time pressure. Being given the time to do so within the workload for often, resources, especially in the context of financial cuts across HE. Diverse needs versus time to plan, adapt. National curriculum requirements limit creativity for additional teaching. Not knowing best practice, sharing best practices in different formats like EduExe, seeing good practice which can be shared across departments. High level autonomy at module and program level, which allows for practices to be piloted. Fantastic. A chance to think differently, to use the space that charters provide, to mobilize senior leadership to create the space and resources to enact change. There are some very good points there, and I can see that people are typing, which is fantastic. I know that the resources and the kind of, as someone said, taking a step back and to enhance anything that you're doing takes a little bit of time, working with others, and that needs resources as well. And we will go through some of these points in our next slides. And as I have said, resources is something that we need to think about whether we can get some funding. Like, for example, earlier I told you that at University of Exeter, we have something called Exeter Education Incubator to get those kind of help, or maybe make space in our own departments and in our programs where people can come together and talk about it, and understanding the best practice, as someone has said. What's the best practice and how can I do that? Sometimes we have to be all doing experiments with it, but there are also sometimes very well published research articles. So that's why we have something called Transformative Education Seminar Series, where we invite subject experts, those who have embedded the ideas of all these three principles: inclusive education, racial and social justice, and sustainability. And we invite them to give a talk on how they have done it and how that could be implemented. For example, our last Transformative Education Seminar Series was in May or April. I don't remember exact date, but we invited a speaker who had done a workshop on understanding how we can embed the kind of understanding of AI and the bias related to gender and race as part of AI. And they have created a kind of a workshop material which can be delivered to students in your departments. It's very generic. It doesn't need to be a subject specific. And Sean has now prepared that workshop. If anyone is interested in those kind of workshops, please get in touch with Sean and he will come and deliver that workshop to your students. Yeah, so there are some questions in any other thoughts and comments there. Do we have any good practice examples of this being implemented? Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, that we have some of these examples where we have invited outsiders to talk about some aspects of transformative education framework. But if you want to have an understanding of how this has been done at the curriculum level or the whole program level, we are working with certain departments at the moment. For example, there is clinical psychology, which is very keen to embed this as part of their curriculum. There are people who have done the piloting of this, the tool that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, curriculum enhancement tool, and they have given us some feedback, so we can go through that. We will come back to that question again later. How is this being embedded into Curriculum for Change? Those who are from University of Exeter, you might have heard about Curriculum for Change, which is a bigger piece of kind of educational project, which looks at many aspects of education and student experience at the University of Exeter. So Transformative Education Framework is a design principle. That means when it comes to curriculum or teaching practices and assessment processes, one has to look into transformative education principles. And when it comes to curriculum review, I will show you the tool that we have developed, and that would be that is what is promoted through Curriculum for Change. Yeah, not knowing where to find the information on the framework. So we'll give you the SharePoint tools. Again, as Sean and I have worked on developing the curriculum review and enhancement tool. And there are, when it comes to teaching practices, at the moment, one of the big projects that we have done is with Rachel Griffiths, thinking about, it's called Inclusive Education Project. We have considered the kind of reviewed the support that is given to disabled students and thinking about the kind of what we can do to make it better. We have come up with many recommendations. We have gone through that, and one of the things is to create a SharePoint to give information about different types of disabilities. What do we mean by reasonable adjustments? What are our kind of obligations with respect to Equality Act 2010, etc. And also Rachel Griffiths is working towards Universal Design for Learning workshop, which is to bring these kind of inclusive education practices into your day-to-day teaching practice. So as part of it, we are also developing an inclusive education policy to make certain reasonable adjustment as part of our day-to-day delivery. Yeah. Is there anything else that I need to address, Sean, or do you want to go through any of the comments there before I proceed?
I'll stop sharing, but I think, I mean, a few of those comments are great and kind of link on to what we're going to talk about next when we introduce the resource, especially around kind of guidance.
Okay, so let me proceed with my presentation then. So this is where we were earlier. Talking about the barriers and enablers. There were fantastic kind of input there in the Padlet. We will come back to it again later. But if you have if you want to know more about anything like resources or where to go, please get in touch with us and we'll help you to make sure you get to the right resource. Sorry. So we are now, what we are going to talk about is the module content. So earlier I showed you that this should be embedded into everything that we do, module content, teaching practice, and assessment and feedback processes. But in next few slides, we are going to talk through module content. So the module content is what is like the syllabus, or what are you going to talk about in your sessions, and how this could be enhanced with respect to transformative education principles. We thought that it's quite important for us to do it because earlier when we first started showing them these three principles are important, and we also highlighted some of the important bits of those three pillars to show that that is what should be done. And it was, of course, was liked by many staff members, but also they wanted something more granular so that we can bring it as part of our curriculum content. So this slide shows the feedback that we received from one of the sessions that we had given to department directors of education and student experience back in December 2022. So even though there are good practices about how to embed that, they said that there needs to be a universal understanding definition of inclusive course content to be applied throughout University of Exeter structure. So inclusivity can take the form of decolonizing, liberating, internationalizing, diversifying, etc. So they said that they agree that it can take various forms, but it is important for us to bring that in a way that helps University of Exeter educators to embed that in a way that is very relevant to our institution. Also, they said that we may not want to amend every module, but again, we don't want to also given just a token module. So is there anything that you can help us to bring that at the program level to make sure that we embed this in a way that the whole program shows the pillars of transformative education framework? So these are all very valid points, because I don't think having just one module means you have ticked a box and you have done the right thing there, but it would be helpful for us to see how we can embed this as part of the whole program. So that's why when Sean joined the institution in December 22, we thought we prioritized this. We thought that we really want to create something that is helpful for our educators to look at their curriculum content, review it with respect to three pillars of transformative education framework, see where they are doing good, because again, many of people are already working on it. Some of these principles are there in our practice for quite a long time. For example, inclusive education related to accessibility, or how we support our students, or how some of this has been reflected in our curriculum, is there in our education system for some time now. But also to think about what can be done in future, because curriculum enhancement should not be just one-off. It should be done on a regular basis, and it should be done in that kind of more, there should be room for improvement all the time. So what we decided was to understand how to bring that kind of a way of doing that using a checklist, but not just doing a tick box exercise, but also thinking about how to proceed from that point to next point as the discipline leads, as well as the other educators deem appropriate. So we wanted to give a tool that helps them to achieve that practically, but also have that kind of autonomy that is at the discipline level. So that's what we wanted to achieve. We have worked with many subject experts here. So in our department, in various departments like School of Education, Business School, they have used whatever we developed. They piloted it and they gave us a feedback on how that could be improved even more. So based on that, lots of discussions with various parties, we have developed this. And as I'm going to hand over it to Sean soon, but just want to say that what we have developed is a kind of a checklist plus a tool that gives a lot of understanding of how that can be done at the program level or at the module level. So this is about course content. So that is about how we define that as the kind of the what is there in your course content, which are the arguments, concepts, perspectives, evidence, and voices that make up the material of modules and programs. So inclusive education is about how teaching content is mindfully created to recognize learners' differences and diverse needs, and how teaching is designed to promote accessibility for all learners. And racial justice and social justice, about thinking about those kind of principles related to curriculum content that explores diverse global perspectives, fostering an expanded understanding of subjects and disciplinary canons, and addressing social injustices and promoting real world change via the curriculum. Sustainability, again, thinking about more holistically address the climate emergency, exploring the critical and global perspectives on both structural and interpersonal dimensions of sustainability. So I will hand over it to Sean now, because Sean is the one who really helped me to bring this to life. And he has a good amount of knowledge in all these areas, and he has worked with educators across the many departments. So over to you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Vrinda. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Yeah. So following off what Vrinda said, we created a resource to help educators approach transformative education from a content perspective. So this kind of sits alongside other guides on pedagogy and assessment, but this really does look at the content that goes and makes up our curriculums. Created a set of guidance across the 3 pillars that kind of refer back to each pillar as well. So kind of we've broken it down into a pillar by pillar basis. But as you'll see throughout, they kind of nod back to each other and kind of interlink, and those can be seen quite obvious throughout. The resource we created, we wanted to create a lot of different avenues for engagement. So some of the common feedback that came back from educators was that some people really liked the kind of the simplicity of a checklist to look through and kind of go through on a step-by-step process before kind of expanding out and thinking about enhancement. Other people liked the different kind of toolkits and guidance we had. Some people liked a bit more of a reflective approach. So we tried to create a SharePoint that reflected the kind of the varied diversity of ways in which educators wanted to use a tool to start thinking about how they expand their curriculum, especially around kind of social and racial justice and the environment as well. So the first pillar, yeah, sorry, you can move on, sorry. So the first pillar set of guidance we created was around inclusive education, which has already been kind of talked about at length in this session. And we wanted to embed the principles of universal design for learning that my colleague Rachel has been leading on and developing some really great resources on it. And we wanted to create a set of about 5 sets of guidance for what that would look like for curriculum content. So these are the 5 sets of criteria that we recommend should be kind of embedded in curriculum design content as the very first thing before we start thinking about kind of worldviews and expanding kind of canons. Is the content actually accessible? Can people actually access it on a universal level? Because it's all very well having some great ideas, but if the content's not accessible, then we kind of fall at the first step. So these steps address that. And just for the sake of the session, I won't talk through every single individual one. But essentially in the green nodes, we have the criteria, and then we kind of expand out to a set of recommendations. And this can be found on our SharePoint. And in yellow are kind of examples, suggestions, prompts of how you might deliver those things in green. So in green is the kind of what we recommend should be within curriculum content, or how curriculum content is designed in an inclusive manner. And in yellow are kind of ways of doing that. As with everything on these mind maps, it's not necessarily an expectation that all of this is relevant. It might not be relevant to some modules based on the way they're designed. This is to provide a set of guidance for you to adapt what's the most relevant. But all of this kind of touched into the UDL work, and on the SharePoint and the external resource that we have and that we can share as well for those not in the institution, we have a glossary and a set of case studies and explanations of how this can be used as well. So that's the inclusive education pillar, which really does look at how we actually make content accessible before we start thinking about how we kind of expand the voices, perspectives, and arguments within our curriculum. So if we move on to the racial and social justice pillar. So again, as with the inclusive education pillar, we have a set of 5 criteria that we've deemed to be important and included in a transformative curriculum. A lot of this, as you can see, kind of touches upon work on decolonizing the curriculum. So this stuff has already existed in our institution. It's already kind of on our toolkits, and we kind of wanted to put it in a place that's central, and kind of expand on some of these arguments. So you can see the kind of structural critiques of disciplinary knowledge for expanding to different worldviews, to expanding kind of disciplinary canons beyond Western and Eurocentric lenses, to explore the colonial roots of disciplinary knowledge. And then the other side of that is tapping into kind of students' lived experiences, their life stories, their narratives, and especially when we're looking at kind of degree awarding gaps, tapping into kind of, I think, student stories and allowing them to kind of have some actualization in the curriculum is really important. And we've developed guidance on that. We're running a workshop as part of EduExe on kind of student voice and how we can bring some of those stories out and start contextualizing it within curriculums organically. So if we move on to the set of examples and recommendations, so I mean, this is quite a sprawling mind map, but yeah, so in yellow is a set of kind of suggestions of how you might go about delivering these things. And as with the previous pillar, it's not an expectation that every single thing will exist in a module, but on a program, some of these things will exist across different modules. So that's the kind of lens initially that we step back to have a look at, because some of the feedback was, this looks quite intimidating on a module by module basis, but across the program, you'll see where some of these things just organically really fit quite well. And as Vrinda said, probably already doing, but we can bring it to the forefront and kind of map this quite coherently.
Yeah.
And it's important to say, everything you see here, there is a set of guidance, resources, toolkits, case studies on our SharePoint that speak to these things individually. But I think Vrinda's going to come in with just an example of how some of these things already exist on a program.
Yeah, so I find this very useful to reflect on what we already have and what else can be done. For example, I'm in my discipline, so I teach at the Department of Clinical and Biomedical Sciences, and I teach on medical sciences course as well as medicine course, and I can see that as something. For example, I was thinking about immunology. Immunology is all about how our body responds to any infections such as maybe bacterial infection, fungal infection, or viral infection, and understanding how we tackle those kind of germs and how we kill those germs to make sure that we live a healthy life. But then thinking about that as a science, sometimes we scientists see that as complete just science, thinking about our body and nothing to do with racial and social justice. But we all know that the recent COVID-19 is a good example of how we can bring that as part of our learning, because it is a viral infection, and we have seen how the world responded to it, and the inequalities that we have seen in how the different populations were affected by COVID-19 and how the vaccination rollout has happened, and what are the effects of long COVID and how our health care systems have coped with it, can all link to those five pillars that have been mentioned there. So thinking about how the colonial roots to disciplinary knowledge, thinking about the vaccine uptake, the kind of how that has been rolled out into high income, low income countries, and what it has been traditionally, how it is at the moment, and how that could be improved. Addressing this kind of disparity would be a good session to understand about science and the kind of the disciplinary, the colonial roots to its kind of inequalities living there. And also thinking about curriculum as a bridge from classroom to society, again, thinking about how these kind of, whatever I said about COVID-19 and the disparities that we have seen, a student on a biomedical science course can learn about how that learning can be applied at the societal level. We don't know what's the future path that student is going to take, but say, for example, if they become a doctor or if they become a person who is working in a pharmaceutical industry, having that knowledge will really help them to bring kind of ethical thinking wherever and whenever they practice these kind of things. And also thinking about global perspectives here is important. Again, understanding of how that was rolled out and what is the effect that we have seen at the global level, and bringing students' lived experience about what they have seen while going through the pandemic. They all enrich the classroom, thinking about how this could be done in a way that they can remember even after leaving the university, that what learning that they have taken from here and how that could be applied at the societal level. So I find that kind of fascinating, bringing all this into our educational system and my classroom. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
That's fine. Yeah. And can we move on to the final pillar, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the final pillar looks at sustainability in the curriculum, and again we have, as the previous two pillars, a set of kind of 5 recommendations. For us, as you can see at the top there, we have addressed UN Sustainable Development Goals, but we take a relatively critical approach. We kind of want to explore other responses to the climate emergency from activist bases, social movements, to diverse global perspectives. We're aware that the UN is one framework in which we can kind of draw upon, but there are so many other frameworks that are useful for kind of pedagogy and curriculum development. And we've run a bunch of workshops in the previous year on exploring alternatives to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we know that's quite popular at Exeter, is moving beyond that one approach. And you can kind of see here also how it links to the previous pillar. Like, we want to integrate global perspective on sustainability, and we also want to bring in the lived experiences of our students who have very different relationships to the climate emergency based on where they're from, based on the careers they're going into, based on their experiences before they even get to university. And we want to kind of tap into that to enrich our curriculum. But we're running a workshop on education for sustainable development and student voice on Wednesday, I believe, or Thursday, I believe, as part of EduExe, which kind of looks at how you could bring that to life in your curriculum across different disciplines. So that's our kind of five pillars there. And then again, if we'll go into the next step of the mind map, which looks at different examples, different approaches that you might take to do this. And again, obviously this might not be, all of this won't be relevant to one particular module, but across the program, you would see quite a lot of this would naturally kind of organically come in, especially looking at intersections of environmental and social justice. You can kind of see there how that could tap into various things from human rights, food security, to healthcare, environmental racism. There's lots of different avenues, and I think the purpose of this tool is to basically create almost like a tapestry that you can go into different approaches, that one approach might not work, but something might really be relevant, and kind of galvanizing and bring forth the kind of framework. And as with the other pillars on our SharePoint, you'll see a set of guidance on how you can do these things. We have toolkits on embedding UN sustainability goals, education for sustainable development, and also resources on decolonizing sustainable education as well, and uploading a kind of student voice and education for sustainable development resource as well. So we have workshops and asynchronous resources to go alongside this. There's a lot of change going on with the SharePoint at the moment. We've, just to link back to some of the feedback actually on that Padlet, some of our students, we've got some student auditors as part of education, students organising for sustainability, who have done a kind of soft audit of some modules and courses and brought about some really interesting case studies attached to the work in this framework. And the plan is over the summer to start uploading them, so there is a reference point to what's going on within our institution that's up to date and in line with these recommendations. So you can kind of go in and see how other disciplines have approached these issues. So that's kind of just a very quick kind of, I guess, overview of our approach for curriculum content. And like I say, all this sits on our SharePoint, where you can find all the other complementary guidance, workshops, seminar series alongside of it. And we also developed an external resource, which we presented at the Advanced HE Sustainability Symposium back in March. So if there's anyone here from outside the institution that kind of wants to see the checklist and see the mind maps and guidance, we can absolutely share that. And I just also wanted to throw some praise to Rosie, who's been really instrumental in helping develop some of these, the graphics, the imagery, and getting the kind of layout of this stuff together, and has the patience of a saint, because we've been back and forth with so many drafts and so many pilots, so has played a massive role in also constructing this. Just some kind of feedback and reception of those that have either used it or been involved in a pilot or just reviewed it and given feedback. Like I say, the first real 12 months of getting this resource was pilots' feedback, and I think now we kind of have a more of a rough understanding of where it sits within curriculum for change. We can start rolling out on a more kind of in-depth basis, and doing some program or module level workshops on this resource in particular. And I think that's it. Some time for Q&As, I believe 15 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I hope you like the way we have created this curriculum review and enhancement tool. And as Sean said, we are very happy to come to your departments and talk through the resource and help you to get on with review and enhancement. And if you're an outsider outside to University of Exeter, we are quite happy to share the resource that we have developed for outside of University of Exeter staff as well. Thank you. Open for any questions.